The Illuminate Arts and Faith Conference in Chattanooga, Tennessee wants to help you find your tribe. Do you get way too excited about quoting Wendell Berry or C.S. Lewis in conversations with coworkers? Does your Spotify playlist include hymns, a little jazz, and a whole lot of Andrew Peterson? Join your tribe at Illuminate March 31 and April 1 for education and inspiration from speakers Russ Ramsey, Douglas McKelvey, John Hendricks, and others. Find a complete list of session topics and ticket information at southern.edu/illuminate.
In 2024, I set out to meet as many poets as I could and spend an hour with each one. I got more than I bargained for, more insight, more clarity, more hope. It's proved to be one of the richest highlights of my life. 17 writers, 17 deeply human conversations that made me sit up and pay attention. Franz Kafka once said, if the book we're reading doesn't wake us up with a blow to the head, what are we reading for? A book must be the axe for the frozen sea within us. And that's what I hope this new book will do. I hope it wakes us up, my friends. I hope these conversations will be the catalyst for something to be reawakened, re-enchanted, and reinvigorated. It's called An Axe for the Frozen Sea, Conversations with Poets About What Matters Most. I'm Ben Palpin, and I hope you'll come and listen in as I spend a little time with poets like Lucy Shaw, Malcolm Guite, Dana Gioia, and Lee Young Lee. Pull up a chair at the table as we dig into what it means to write well and to live well. An Axe for the Frozen Sea is now available from Rabbit Room Press. Visit the store at rabbitroom.com, or better yet, ask about it at your favorite bookseller.
Welcome to the Habit Podcast, conversations with writers about writing. I'm Jonathan Rogers, your host. J.J. Heller writes and sings songs to remind people that they are loved. After releasing 10 studio albums, she recently took up a new discipline. On the first Friday of every month, she releases a new song to the various digital platforms. Dave Heller, her husband and collaborator, joined us for this conversation. J.J. Heller, I have loved your music for a long time, and I'm so glad to be able to sit down and talk with you for a little bit, and your husband, Dave, your writing partner. So thank you for being here on the Habit Podcast.
We are happy to be here. Right, Dave?
Yeah, that's right.
I've been since I've known that you're coming on the podcast. I've been thinking about a line from one of your songs. The best thing I think is the song, "I will sing a song that only I can sing," and I think that's a great working definition of voice. What we mean by voice when we're talking about writing, whether that's songwriting or any other kind of writing. So that's where I want to start our conversation today. What do you mean when you say singing the song that only I can sing?
Well, I've been making music with my husband Dave since college. I started writing songs the summer before my sophomore year of college. So that was 1999. Mm-hmm. And there's a Miles Davis quote that I love, and he says, it takes a long time to sound like yourself.
Yeah.
And so I feel like after, almost 20 years of writing songs, mm-hmm. that I've figured out who I am as an artist and a songwriter, and, mm-hmm. and what I have to say and what kind of things I have to say and how I want to say it. And so we sat down to write this song, and we actually wrote it with another songwriter in town, Jillian Linklater, and we were just talking about how as artists, it's tempting sometimes to look at the success of somebody else and then try to emulate that, and try to recreate their success. And no good really comes out of it. And mm-hmm. I think that the best thing that we can offer to the world is who we are as individuals, because God created all of us so uniquely, and so mostly I think it's not a very good use of time to try to be someone else.
Yeah. I was talking to somebody last night. Actually, I do a webinar every month for writers, and somehow it came up. This person was saying that one of the doubts she has when she sits down to write is, who am I to say this or whatever, and that sort of led to a conversation of, the question of who am I to do this. That's the answer to that question. Kind of is your voice and your calling, right? I mean,
Right.
I'm always telling writers that you're seeking to give to the reader something they can't get for themselves.
Yeah.
And in my mind, that's tied pretty closely to what this language of singing the song that only you can sing, right? I mean, it's not even a matter of I've got to have some wisdom or insight that nobody's ever had before. I just need to tell in my own voice what I've seen to be true. Yeah.
Right. And most of the time, we're writing songs just about the human experience. And I've heard so many times from listeners that through my songs, I'm saying exactly how they're feeling. They just didn't know how to say it themselves. And so I think that is such a gift and a responsibility to write songs that express things that are in people's hearts. And I think what helps me not get bogged down with that question of who am I to do this, but rather see it as an unbelievable gift. Like, I don't know why God has put me in this situation and given me this platform when I look around me and see, especially living in Nashville, just how much talent is here. Like, I don't know why I'm the one who gets the megaphone, but instead of, dwelling on that, to just be like, okay, well, then what can I do with that? Yeah. And how can I communicate with people in a way that brings joy and peace, and to just remind them that they're not alone, and that we all go through seasons of suffering in life, but that there is hope and there is redemption available to us.
Yeah. I think of your songs as having, I think of you as having a distinct voice, and of course that's literally your voice. It's it's recognizable, but also the way you talk. I mean, what writing writers, the people who put words on paper call voice.
Right.
This recognizable way of talking, and so it was. To be, I guess I should say, reminded that you're not actually writing these songs by yourself. That Dave is very involved in the writing. I'm interested in. I want to hear from you, Dave, on how does this. What's the question? I mean, there's this voice that feels like JJ, and yet it's two people who are doing this. Yeah.
The way that both of us use our strengths is very complementary, because JJ is very much a detail person, and I spent a lot of time kind of looking at the form of whatever it is that we're trying to say, and so a lot of that ends up having to do with how does verse 1 of a song end up relating to the chorus and then moving forward with verse 2. And like JJ is certainly far more of a wordsmith, but I feel like the role that I play has a lot more to do with just kind of guardrails to make sure that like the entire composition ends up making sense, rather than just being a whole bunch of unrelated statements that are somehow tied together by a melody. And so I feel like that's a lot of what I bring to the table when we're co-writing, is just sort of asking those prodding questions of like, where is this headed, and why are we saying this, and then like allowing her to hopefully find a voice to be able to say that. And I'm always very proud when I make a suggestion and it actually makes its way lyrically
I wrote that line.
Yeah, it's like normally it's like I have 4 words, but I feel like sometimes artists are so particular kind of with their magnifying glass, taking a look at like blades of grass individually, that they're not necessarily pulling back to see like what is the forest. And that's a lot of the role.
Yeah, I feel like Dave's really good at kind of coming up with the big picture concepts, like what are the main things that we want to touch on in this song? Like, what are the important takeaways? And then I can take those ideas and kind of put words around them.
Yeah. So, like, for example, the song The Best Thing that you guys have been talking about, a lot of the impetus for that song was kind of taking a look at where JJ exists in the music industry. And, like, a huge part of JJ's role is speaking to mothers, like a strong female audience, and in some aspects speaking to children. And I feel like those two audiences, at least in the context that JJ is speaking to them to, are sometimes overlooked, and not necessarily as celebrated as the youthful, cool pop audience that everyone's trying to hit when it comes to the big radio single that runs up the charts. And we've realized over time that what we're trying to make is not cool music, because we're not cool enough to even know what cool music sounds like. But it has way more to do with creating music that lasts. And so I feel like the arc that we've seen in JJ's music over time was moving from asking the question, are you impressed with what I'm doing, to what gift can I give you that you can pass on to the next generation. And like the goal now is basically, how can we make music that like today's moms play for their children, and when those children are mothers, they pass on to their children. And that's not a typical perspective. And it feels like the song that only JJ can sing. And so that was kind of like a whole bunch of the foundation that we set out to explore when we went into that write.
How do you get past the question of, are you impressed with me?
I think years and years of just not being cool. I mean, and also just like practically speaking, when I first started writing songs in college, I was doing pretty much 100% of the songwriting. And then it was gradually over the years after Dave and I got married, he started to get a little bit more and more involved in the songwriting. And eventually it just became a total collaboration. But when I was in college, I loved Alanis Morissette. And so that's what I was trying to do. I was trying to be angsty and sing really loudly. And it was always, even back then, it was when I sang the quieter, heartfelt songs that people would respond to that. And so I think it's just been paying attention to the things that people respond to. Are they responding to like the cool-ish pop songs, or are they responding to when I'm just being myself and being a little bit more introspective and quiet? And it's always kind of the non-flashy songs that I hear the most stories about. And so we're always trying to pay attention to what's resonating with people and then trying to make more of that.
Yeah. Okay, next question, JJ. You said, I've seen this on your website and elsewhere, there's a child in all of us, and that's who I make music for.
Yeah.
I want to hear more about that. And one thing I want to hear is how's that different from making children's music? We'll start there.
Right. This is a very layered question because I most recently have been releasing a bunch of lullabies. 5 years ago, we wrote an album full of original lullabies that we wrote for our children, and they were both babies at that point. And it was kind of a left turn from the songs that I had been writing, and I was in a place where we had just come off of having 2 songs on Christian radio, just totally unexpectedly. And then we followed up by pitching them more songs that they could play on the radio. And they kept saying, no, thanks, no, thanks, no, thanks. Just like years of this. And I was trying to write songs that would crack the code, that they would pick to play. And I was just getting more and more frustrated to the point where I didn't even really want to write songs anymore. And
when was this? How long ago was this?
This was like 2012.
Okay.
And so I knew I needed to like take a break from that. And so I thought, okay, I'm in the middle of mom mode right now. There are diapers everywhere, like bottles, all of that. So what if I just wrote songs for my kids about motherhood and just tried to think about what are the things that I want them to hear as they're falling asleep. Just songs full of truth and peace and love and hope. And so we wrote this album called I Dream of You, and it was kind of an afterthought, and we made it in about a week in the studio and then released it into the world. And it, it wasn't a huge success right off the bat because that's kind of the way my entire career has gone. It's like nothing comes out of the gate and like as a major success. But over the years, we just kept hearing more and more and more stories from people of ways that God was using these simple lullabies, whether they were playing it over their foster children that they would bring into their homes, and or like a soldier overseas listening to lullabies. It was the only thing that would help him sleep as he's hearing like gunfire in the distance, and so we decided, okay, maybe there's something to this, and then last November, we released a follow-up lullaby album, only this time full of cover songs, and we totally beefed up the production. And so we hired a string section and just orchestrated the whole thing. There's a children's choir, and we really put our hearts into it, just with the mindset that children are worth it. And I think what we did the first time is what a lot of people do, and they just make a children's or a lullaby album as an afterthought of like, I don't know what else to do, so I'll just do this thing. I won't put much time and effort into it. And we just realized that like the power that lullabies can have, and just what a sacred opportunity that is. Like, to have our music playing as mothers are rocking their babies in the middle of the night, like bonding with them. And so it was so interesting that a few months ago I was doing a podcast interview with Andy Osenga on the Pivot, and he asked me, like, he already knew that I've had a history of panic attacks and anxiety. And so he asked, do you feel like there's any correlation between your anxiety and your motivation to make lullabies? And I had never thought of that before. And it occurred to me that I feel compelled to make lullabies because it's what my soul needs to hear. I need to be reminded that God is in control, that everything's going to be okay. And so as we're making these lullabies, I think it's not only for children, but it's for all of us. It's for the child that still needs to be reminded that everything's going to be okay, and that we are loved. And
yeah. It's a reminder that there's something truer than what you see with your eyeballs.
Yeah.
This world that seems to be in so many ways falling apart. Well, there's okay, that's true enough, but there's something truer than that.
Yeah.
Okay, so that is, you thought you were writing children's music, and you discovered you were writing music for the child and everybody.
Yeah. Yeah, and so we've heard so many stories, not only my kids memorize all the lyrics and she sings it around the house, but so many more stories about the moms writing to us and saying that they would wake up to feed their baby in the middle of the night, and they're so exhausted and maybe suffering from postpartum depression or postpartum anxiety, and how the songs ministered to their own souls, and that they needed to hear the lullabies as well.
Yeah. I love it. I mean, I feel like that's the calling of writers of all kinds, to tell the truer story. And so I love hearing that. And you'd never made the connection between your own anxiety and the lullabies until Andy Osenga asked you about it?
Correct.
That guy is good at asking questions, isn't he? That's such a great podcast. I love the pivot.
But I mean, I think even all of this goes hand in hand with what we were talking about at the beginning about finding your voice. And for me, just writing songs coming out of my experience with anxiety. And also the fact that I have a polyp on one of my vocal cords, so I physically cannot sing loudly. And so for a long time, I was really frustrated with that. And then I realized that, I mean, that's such a gift, because I had to learn how to function inside this set of parameters. And at first I fought against it, but then I realized, wait, that I think that this is where my voice shines anyway. And so it was like God was kind of like shining the spot, like, hey, how about you focus on this, because this is what's special. And so not only can I not sing loudly, but then there's also like I write lullabies because I need to calm the fears in my own heart. And so it's just like all of these things that seem like bad things, like the polyp on my vocal cord and panic attacks, they were all pointing me in a direction to create something beautiful that could also help somebody else and bring beauty and peace into their lives.
The songs that only you can sing, right?
Yeah.
And our limits are a part of that. Those parameters. That's I love it. That's great. Okay, you've been releasing. No, I'm sorry. One more question about the anxiety. Sorry.
Yes.
How does in terms of your writing process, in terms of your what you're thinking when you are putting words on a page, how does your struggle with anxiety impact that?
It's a theme that comes up quite a bit in my songwriting. A theme what
you end up writing about? You mean, okay, but I mean in the process itself. You know what I'm saying?
Like, I feel...
The fact, like, I can answer that.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, good.
Okay. So, like, one of the things that JJ learned as a tool when it came to managing anxiety when it was at its worst, that, like, has kind of just been absorbed, and kind of like if you're learning to walk, you have to very intentionally consider, okay, lift up this foot, drop it, move forward, and then eventually you start to do these things without even considering them. I feel like that's kind of the place where JJ has landed with this, where early in dealing with anxiety, one of the tools that she learned was that anxiety is telling you lies. It's saying, you're not good enough, this is scary, like, you're going to die a horrible death, like in the next 3 minutes or whatever it happens to be. And the tool is to take a moment and recognize and name that fear. Like, what is that fear? And then replace it with the truth. Like, what are the things that I know that counter that fear? And I feel like that is the thing that we're consistently doing in the songwriting process, is recognizing here is a horrible thing that's happening in the world, whether tangible or intangible, and here is the truth that we can hold on to that counters that fear. And I feel like that was something that we really had to think about a long time ago, but it's now something that we just kind of naturally do. I remember hearing Sarah Groves talking about a conversation she was having with Charlie Peacock in the studio, where she just felt like she was kind of pushing up against the same message over and over again with her material, and she was telling Charlie, I feel like I'm just writing the same song over and over again. And Charlie said, well, yeah, that's true, but it's a really good song. And I feel like for most songwriters, that's what we end up doing. We've got like 3 songs that we just keep revisiting over and over again, and just put it to a different melody with some different words behind it.
Yeah. Okay, you're releasing a song every month, first Friday of every month, right?
That's right. Yep.
Does that ratchet up your anxiety to say I've got this coming up? Yeah, we don't talk about anxiety anymore.
Well, we when we first started on that trajectory, yes, because we were always playing catch up.
Yeah.
And always pressing up against that deadline of, okay, it's coming, we gotta make something. But now we've kind of fallen into a rhythm, and so now it's like the end of the summer, and we already have our songs set through the end of the year. So,
and we've got 15 more songs that we're working on for next year.
That's right. So
Excellent.
we're ahead of the curve now.
Next year's going to be 15 months long.
Just so everybody knows, plan accordingly. But I think what makes it easier, though, to create content is to just be willing to collaborate with other artists. And because we're creating so much content, it almost makes it a necessity to collaborate.
Yeah, right.
Or else, not only are we like making the same song over and over, like thematically, but it sounds even sonically the same, and you don't want that.
Yeah, right.
And so to bring in these other voices has been not only inspiring, but really fun too. And it's wonderful to be at a place in my career where I'm 17 years in, and I think early on I would have felt really threatened by that. Like, oh, are they better than me? Or like, are they going to listen to my ideas? And now it's just fun to watch something come together. And sometimes I contribute a lot to the song, and sometimes I contribute a little, but it's always amazing to see how good the finished product is, and how we come away with a song that we couldn't have written just the two of us. It's better.
Yeah.
And so that's been a joy. And we've only been co-writing with other people consistently for the past like year and a half, 2 years or so.
Yeah.
I think one of the things that's really exciting about releasing on such a consistent basis is that it forces us to continue generating new content. And like the old model that the music industry adopted was invest a whole bunch of money in a single project that you can live off of for potentially years while you're making whatever the next thing is. And it feels like this moment in time, at least, the audience is always looking for something new. You know, Stranger Things came out on Netflix, and within a week they're looking for something else.
Yeah, right.
And it's like it took an entire year for them to make that thing.
Yeah.
And so, like, rather than trying to play the same game that the industry is playing, running a song up the charts for months or years, we get to just do the thing that we actually have control over, which is creating new things.
Yeah.
And so we feel like that's a huge contribution that we get to make into the world, is to just say, like, hey, we made something new. Every 4 weeks you get to hear it.
You're like a farmer. You're always producing something.
That's right. We always changing up the crops.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, the thing too that I've had to come to terms with is I'm not always going to absolutely love every song that we release. Like, there have been songs that we've put out over the past few years that, like, they're not my favorite, and that's kind of just one of the hazards that comes with releasing a new song every single month. But I've just kind of made peace with that. Sometimes you have to make something so that there's room to make something else.
Yeah.
Like, you have to learn from that experience, and then move on.
Yeah. To return to our farming metaphor, it's your job to sow, and the harvest is somebody else's business. Who knows what's going to come of these songs.
Yeah.
All right, last question. We got to wrap up. Who are the writers who make y'all want to write?
Well, obvious answer is C.S. Lewis. Always inspired. I at least I feel like in every other song there's some lyric that we stole from his writing.
His fiction, his nonfiction, both.
Yeah. Like we have our own record label in quotations. It's just, the name of our small business is Stone Table Records.
Okay.
So Narnia metaphor. But we were discussing this question earlier this morning, and I was saying that for me, it's not only like who are the writers that inspire me to write, but it's like, am I putting myself in the right environment to be inspired? Because I know for me, if I take the time to pick up a book of poetry, like Mary Oliver or Billy Collins, then I know that when I put that book down, I'm going to want to write something. But I'm not always like, I feel like sometimes I'm too lazy to do that, or I forget to do that. And then when I read poetry, I'll be like, oh like I want to create something. And so, or to go to a concert, I almost always leave wanting to write something myself. And so, it's not only just finding those specific voices that inspire me, but to be proactive about how can I put myself in a place where I feel inspired.
Yeah, that's great. Dave, you got anything to add to that?
Well, I feel like the writers who inspire me write in ways that I am not capable of writing.
Okay.
The gift that I have to bring to the table has so much more to do with the editorial kind of aspect of writing that, like, the writer who inspires me to write is J.J. Heller. Because I actually get to take it and sort of mold it a little bit in order to reframe it. But I feel like I am constantly listening to podcasts or audiobooks or watching documentaries, trying to glean from other voices in order for that to end up influencing what I have to bring to the table. So, like, I would definitely recommend, like, checking out the masterclass video series that are online, where you just end up seeing people who are at the top of their game sharing their secrets with other people. And, like, for me, Ken Burns as a documentary filmmaker was incredibly inspiring for me to end up going to songwriting and starting to use my voice, because he's talking about making something beautiful and making something that has heart and intentionality behind it. And I feel like you can certainly cross disciplines and have that influence your own.
I should have asked you which editors make you want to edit.
Yeah.
but you know, everybody who's making something beautiful is an ally, right?
That's right.
Yeah,
that's right.
All right. Well, thank y'all for the beautiful things y'all make. I love what you do, and keep it up. And thanks for being on The Habit.
Thanks for having us.
The Rabbit Room has partnered with Lipscomb University to make this podcast possible. Lipscomb has graciously given us access to their recording studio and the Center for Entertainment and Arts building. We're so grateful for their sponsorship, their encouragement, and the good work they do in Nashville. Special shout out as well to the Arcadian Wild for allowing us to use their delightful song Finch in the Pantry as part of this podcast. Check out their album of the same name for more excellent music.
The Habit membership is a library of resources for writers by me, Jonathan Rogers. More importantly, The Habit is a hub of community where like-minded writers gather to discuss their work and give each other a little more courage. Find out more at thehabit.co.
This podcast was produced by The Rabbit Room, a 501c3 nonprofit dedicated to fostering Christ-centered community and spiritual formation through music, story, and art. All our podcasts are made possible by the generous support of our members. To learn more about us, visit rabbitroom.com, and to become a member, rabbitroom.com/donate.
If you've enjoyed this podcast episode, consider joining the Rabbit Room membership. Your membership helps sustain this community, funding everything from publishing and podcasts and theater productions to events and programs that support artists who create with a Christ-centered vision. We'd love to have you on board. Learn more at rabbitroom.com/member.